When we talk about accessibility and inclusion, and especially with respect to people with disabilities, especially in tech, are we actually really doing the best that we can? That's what we're going to talk about today. Over the past weekend, I gave a talk to a community, and the organizer had emailed me just before, like sometime before, to let me know that one of the attendees was deaf or hard of hearing. And I have been giving talks like for the past couple of years, but it never occurred to me beyond having an interpreter, someone who can communicate in sign language for people who may be hard of hearing, or how to include people who are hard of hearing in these kinds of conversations and events and meetups and all those kinds of things. And the obvious thing will be, have someone who can communicate in sign language so that the people who are in the audience who need that will be able to participate. But in this instance, it wasn't possible to get someone who could interpret in sign language. And I had to rethink my slides. Like usually when I make slides, I follow the quote unquote best practices, not so much text. Use images. Don't have a lot of text on the slides. Those kinds of things, which, that's what everybody tells you when it comes to good slide design. But in that instance, I realized that I had to be very descriptive in my slides. I had to literally almost write exactly what I was saying so that everyone would be able to follow, including the person who was hard of hearing. And it just made me start thinking about, in the broader context of tech and our conferences and our meetups and our events, how much we're doing with that. Some weeks back, I stumbled upon a podcast episode interview that I had where I talked about inclusion, accessibility from the context of thinking about people's technological needs and how you need someone who has that lived experience to be able to give feedback and have their input in how whatever you're designing or creating is designed. And I had said that it's important to have someone who has that lived experience, right? And yeah, it makes so much sense. Like, why don't we do that? Because when you're planning something or you're creating something, if you don't have someone whose lived experience is not quote unquote the norm, they are quote unquote the edge case, then you can't design something that is useful or usable to them. So there was a TED Talk I had listened to not long before I did that interview on the podcast. And the person had the condition of dwarfism. And she said that accessing everything was so difficult because traveling, going to the airport, all kinds of situations were so hard. She always needed somebody's help to be able to navigate through the airport or other scenarios where we don't even think twice of, like, when we experience them. And I really thought about the person who was hard of hearing who attended the webinar that I gave this past weekend. And I thought about how has she been able to access other such things before? Like, do people think about who is in the audience that may be hard of hearing or that has other needs that may not be visible and that we don't think about? And how can we start thinking about that more and incorporating that in how we design our events, our conferences, our meetups, and not just the products that we build, right? We always talk about accessibility in the context of software products and even in physical spaces. Like, can you enter into the bank if you use a wheelchair easily? Like, can you go to the security doors? Those kind of things. But even in the events that we host and the meetups that we put together, when we think about how the talks are given or whatever is being shared, how can we rethink those formats? How can we make sure that people who have diverse needs, different, like a wide range, right? How can we start making sure that those people and everyone is able to participate effectively. There's something that I often say in regards to accessibility and inclusion, especially in the way I have been talking about it in the past, looking at technological needs with respect to accessing software tools, which is that the edge case is the best case. We often say, you hear that, oh, this is an edge case, this is an edge case, this is not the quote unquote regular normal case. But if we design for the edge case, then we're making it easy for everyone. But if we start from designing from the quote unquote norm, then we're making it harder for other people to use and access those things. And if there's one thing that everyone should know who builds software products around inclusion and accessibility, is that people have different needs at different points. And there's this Microsoft accessibility toolkit, I'll link to it in the show notes, that show you that there's like temporal, permanent, situational needs. So somebody can break their arm and for a short while be only able to use one arm, or they may be carrying a baby or holding something in one arm and may be only able to use one arm, and then somebody might actually lose a whole arm or even two, and that is a different scenario as well. But at the end of the day, if you design something that somebody who has no arms can use, or somebody who has only one arm can use, then even if you have two arms, but in a scenario you can only use one arm, maybe because the other arm is broken, then you'll still be able to use it. So designing for the edge case, quote unquote, in every scenario, whether it's in how a talk is given, or how a conference is organized, or how software is built, or how a space is designed, whatever it might be, designing for the quote unquote edge case means designing for everyone. And as I have recently put it, the edge case is the best case. Bye. A quick reminder that I am accepting questions for the podcast. If you have any questions that you'd like me to cover, any things that you'd like me to talk about, please fill the form. I'm going to put the question form in the show notes. So yeah, bye. Thank you for joining me on today's episode of A Couple of Things. If you enjoyed this episode or found any part of it insightful, don't forget to share with your friends on your social media, and be sure to leave a comment or a review if you can on your podcast listening app. Thank you.